Week 9 of the fantasy football season, and his wide receiver sits this week. The start DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. I know DJ Moore, the numbers have gone down over the last few weeks with Tyson Beckett in there at quarterback, but this week a good matchup versus old division foe when he was with the Carolina Panthers in the New Orleans Saints. So DJ Moore, we know, is one of the better route runners in the league. Yard after catch, one of the better receivers in the league at doing that as well. And this week here, I know he's versing a good secondary in the New Orleans Saints. Here's DJ Moore. But like I said, he could go out there, he can make the plays. Baggett has a decent arm where he could get the football to him. And even if Lattimore's on him for the majority of this game, it could be a game where the Bears are playing catch-up and we could see garbage time. So he's a next start, Adam Thielen of the Carolina Panthers. Adam Thielen, one of the best route runners in the league. And what a bounce-back season it's been for Thielen here. After the Minnesota Vikings cut him loose and pretty much he looked finished for the most part last season. But now he's rejuvenated. He's having a great year. Top 10 in fantasy points at the wide receiver position. And this week, good matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts coming to town. So it don't matter the situation or the game. Adam Thielen's going out there. He's found the end zone multiple games in a row now and making plays. And like I said, one of the better possession wide receivers in the league. And a start once again. Chris Olave a start as well. Chris Olave, the last 2 weeks, the numbers have definitely dropped off. But this New Orleans Saints team, they are moving the football well still. Where Derek Carr, 3 games in a row, has gone over 300 yards. So this week here, Chris Olave, I think we see the breakout game. Great matchup versus the Chicago Bears, one of the worst secondaries and defenses in the league. We know he's a great route runner, and he just has to have that breakout game come up for him. I know his best games this year has only been 2 games over 100 yards, but this week here, I think Chris Olave could turn things around. Like I said, versus a weak defense that just got torched by the Chargers offense. And I got him as a start as well. Zay Flowers, another start. Flowers coming off a bad ball game in that Week 8 victory at the Arizona Cardinals, where Gus Edwards, it was his game in that one with 3 touchdowns on the ground. But Zay Flowers, we know he's an electric wide receiver. We know they use him as a gadget guy as well over there as Baltimore. But like I said, Gus Edwards and Mark Andrews were the catalysts in that victory at the Arizona Cardinals. But this week here, a home game for the Baltimore Ravens, where they played better at home obviously than they have on the road this season here versus Seattle secondary. That's not a bad secondary, but it's a young secondary as well, where they are vulnerable to giving up big plays. So I think Zay Flowers in this one has a good game, and he's a start. Deontay Johnson, another start. Thursday Night Football, we know these games are usually high scoring and shootouts for the most part. Kenny Pickett, they're not ruling him out 100% yet, but I'm thinking on the short week and the way he left the game landing on his shoulder, I think Mitchell Trubisky is going to be the starting quarterback. And to be honest, Trubisky, he has a better arm than Kenny Pickett, even though he's not accurate for the most part, is Trubisky. But Deontay Johnson, one of the better route runners and possession receivers in the league. Tennessee, one of the worst defenses in the league in terms of giving up fantasy points to wide receivers. So it's a good matchup. Like I said, could be a mini shootout. There's going to be some buzz in around this game as well. Will Levis, what a debut he had last week, and see what he could do versus a Pittsburgh defense like this. And I think Deontay Johnson versus the secondary can make plays, and we saw them trade one of their better secondary guys as well last week to the Eagles and Bayard. So right now, I like Johnson as a start. Rashee Rice, another start for me. This could be a monster shootout between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins in Germany Sunday morning game. So right here, Rashee Rice, I've said it all season, I think he's the best receiver in terms of fantasy football on this roster. Kadarius Toney, he hasn't done anything this season. Sky Moore, he hasn't done anything. We know Kelsey's obviously the number 1 option in the passing game, but he's a tight end. And Rashee Rice, he's at least going out there and putting in serviceable number 3 to flex option numbers. So this week here versus Miami secondary, that's definitely healthy now for the most part. With Jalen Ramsey back, he had an interception in the Week 8 victory versus New England Patriots. And Xavier Howard as well back most likely in this game. I think Rashee Rice, he'll be a little bit tougher, but Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, after an embarrassing loss to one of the worst teams in the Denver Broncos, I think they get this passing game back on track. And I have Rice as a start, and the final start, DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. So DK Metcalf, I know the numbers have been way down this season, and him and Geno Smith are just missing on that big play on the field. We know Geno's targeting him, but they're just not connecting. But this week here, Baltimore in a game where they're going to have to put up points early and often to keep up with this offense. And we know many teams have gone into Baltimore this season and even the last few seasons, and they've got blown out and tough for them to recover. But right now, I think DK Metcalf, he's due for a breakout game. Tyler Lockett was due, and he had a nice ball game in Week 8 versus the Cleveland Browns. So I think Metcalf in this one, him and Gino finally going to connect, even though it's a tough matchup, like I said, at Baltimore. But if they want to win this tough game and improve to 6-2, I think Metcalf will step up and is a start this week. Now to the sits, Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers. So Watson, it's just been a bad season all around for him. Coming into the year, missed the first 3 games with the hamstring injury. Now Jordan Love in this offense can't get the ball moving. Pretty much all his passing yards and stuff have been in garbage time or times where they got no choice but to drop back and throw the football. So the Packers, they've been down early and often the last 3 weeks here where they're trailing. And you would think that would help a guy like Christian Watson, where we know he's a deep ball threat and one of the quickest wide receivers in the league. But that hasn't been the case. And this week here, I know this Ram team, they just got torched by CeeDee Lamb and the Dallas Cowboys. But still, like I said, this offense is nowhere near the Cowboys. Is this Green Bay Packer offense. And Christian Watson, I don't think he's 100% as well with the hamstring. And right now, he's a guy, obviously, that I'm going to sit. I got to see more out of him before I could put him in the lineup. Hollywood Brown, he's been a solid wide receiver this season. I know Kyler Murray, there's a possibility he could come back this week in this game. But it's a very tough matchup at the Cleveland Browns that don't give up a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. And this one, Denzel Ward, one of the better corners in the league, most likely will be on Hollywood Brown most of the game or the majority of the game, depending if they're going to line him up on Brown one-on-one or just on one side of the field. But anyway, if it stops Kyler Murray, Hollywood Brown, I know he had a garbage time touchdown for the most part in last week's game versus the Baltimore Ravens. But this week here with a tough matchup, and who knows who's going to be a quarterback, even though I don't think Kyler Murray's just going to come out of the gate and put up huge numbers if he starts in this one. He's a sit. Joshua Palmer, a sit as well for me. A tough matchup at the New York Jets, one of the better defenses in the league this season here. Joshua Palmer, he got banged up in that game, even though he did return in the Week 8 victory versus the Chicago Bears. This is a tougher matchup, like I said, with the Jets. Quentin Johnson, he's starting to play more snaps in the offense. He had 10 PPR fantasy points. And Palmer, even though we've seen some great games out of him over last season and this season, he's a guy right now that's been inconsistent for the most part throughout his career. Now with Johnson, like I said, in the lineup more, and also a tough matchup versus the Jets, have him a sit. Jordan Addison, a sit as well. I know right now Kirk Cousins is out for the season, and obviously that's the reason Jordan Addison's going to be a sit. I'm going to bring in a veteran quarterback right out of the gate here, and even if they do, I don't think he'll be ready for Sunday's ball game for this Minnesota Viking team. So this Viking team, they were a team 0-3 to start the season. Justin Jefferson went down, and they've bounced back to go to 4-4. But now without Kirk Cousins, who's known this system very well over the last few seasons, I think it's going to be tough for Jordan Addison, no matter who the quarterback is for the first few weeks in this offense, where I think they can actually rely on the run a lot. I know the Atlanta pass defense has been good versus wide receivers this season, but whatever happened, the Tennessee Titans and DeAndre Hopkins took him by surprise for him going for 128 and 3 touchdowns. But anyway, with a quarterback change in Atlanta being stout for the most part, especially in a road game where their defense has been better at home this season than on the road, Addison is a sit for me, unfortunately. Next sit's Jahan Dotson of the Washington Commanders. So Jahan Dotson, I know he's a talented wide receiver, but this season he really hasn't done much. And I know he finally had a big ball game in the Week 8 loss, a tough one versus the Philadelphia Eagles over there in Washington. And this week here, pretty good matchup on paper at the New England Patriots. I know Curtis Samuel might miss this game as well, but right now Jahan Dotson, he's not really going out there and being a consistent wide receiver. Last season was a good rookie year for him. And even if he gets more playing time and more snaps and targets with Curtis Samuel, if he's out in this game, we saw Jamison Crowder even step up with a nice 95-yard game and a touchdown. So this week here with a tougher matchup, him and Sam Howell for the most part this season not being on the same page. And even though it was a great breakout game, I still can't trust him week in and week out as a start right now. So he's a sit. Gabe Davis, another sit for me. Davis had a breakout game finally after putting in 2 stinkers with a monster game on Thursday Night Football versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. But this week here, Cincinnati Bengals, this Bengal team, you know, their defense has improved over the last few weeks. We know this Bengal team, 3 games in a row they've won. And Gabe Davis, he's a boom or bust wide receiver. He's pretty much a guy that could get you 20, 25 points in a game, and then the next week 3 or 4 fantasy points. So the way the pattern's been going here for Gabe Davis, like I said, he came off a 23-point fantasy game in PPR league. So right now I'm just following the trends here a little bit. I think it's a down game. Stephon Diggs, he had a decent game, but not a Diggs type of game last week. And I think this is going to be a Stephon Diggs type of game. And obviously Dalton Kincaid, he's emerged already as one of the top tight ends in the league after a few good games in a row. And now Dawson Knox banged up as well on IR. So right now with all those factors, and I think Davis the third or fourth option in this offense still, even though he came off a good game versus Tampa Bay. He's a sit, and the final sit, Michael Thomas of the New Orleans Saints. I know Michael Thomas, he's been a guy, 10, 13 fantasy points. You could pencil him in for each and every week. And he's been healthy, which has been the main part here. Thomas, the last 3 seasons, he's been a very injury-prone wide receiver. But this season, him and Derek Carr have had a good rapport. He's making plays in the middle of the field. I know he's not putting up the monster games as Michael Thomas, and I know it's a good matchup versus a weak Bears secondary, but I think this week it's going to be the Chris Olave show, and Rashid Shaheed's a huge deep ball threat as well for this New Orleans Saints team, where I think they're going to start targeting him more week in and week out. So right now, like I said, Thomas' ceiling is 10, 13 fantasy points, and I definitely think he could have a decent game as Thomas, but this week here, I just have a feeling Olave, it's going to be his game. So that's wide receivers, start sits for week 9 of the fantasy football season.